Dr. Mehaatir stood his ground and, as always, won. His long tenure as the democratically elected Prime Minister from 1981 to 2003 gave him the required mandate to put his vision into practice. Dr. Mahathir's Vision 2020 was the for action. His emphasis on learning from the developmental models of Japan and South Korea was far-sighted. He launched numerous mega projects, such as the Heavy Industries Corporation, including the initiation of infrastructural projects, such as motorways, huge building projects, multimedia super corridor, mega ports and airports, the making of a national car called Proton, and many other technological projects. Today, Malaysia's GDP ranked 35th in the world at $326.9 billion, with the industry sector constituting more than 30% of the economy. Per capita income reached $10,829.9 US compared to less than $350 US in 1960. Moreover, literacy exceeds 94% despite a large and diverse population of more than 30 million inhabitants. All this is largely due to the determination, wisdom, and of our remarkable guest, Dr. Mehaatir. Last but not least, Dr. Mahathir's successes in Malaysia are an inspiration to all of us here in Jordan and elsewhere to learn much from his rich experience and from his persistence and faith in the possibility of driving and realizing positive change and progress despite difficult odds and circumstances. More importantly, to use the lessons learned from the Malaysian experience in formulating our own model for growth and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor I present to you His Excellency Tun Dr. Mahathir bin Mohamad, which will be followed by a quick Q&A session. And thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And a very good evening to everyone. His Highness Prince Hassan, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers, I'm sure, for this invitation to come to Amman, Jordan, to talk about the Malaysian experience in development. I'm glad to be back here. I've been here 3 times before, so I'm very glad to be back here again this time. And I'm very glad to be able to meet so many of the leaders responsible for the administration, development of Jordan. Perhaps I should give some background about Malaysia so that you will understand the problems that Malaysia faced when it became independent in 1957. Malaysia is not unlike Jordan because it has a very mixed population. Principally, there were 3 ethnic groups in Malaysia. The indigenous people were Malays, and I am one of them. And all Malays are Muslims, because if you're not Muslim, you're not a Malay by law. So, and then they make up 60% of the population. Then we have Chinese, about 26 to 30%, of Indians of about 10%, and many other races, descendants of people who have come to stay and become Malaysians, including a lot of Arabs, principally from Yemen. The Arabs, by the way, are doing extremely well in Malaysia. though they may not be doing so well elsewhere. But this mixture of race, divided also by religion, by culture, by language, and even by economic achievement, is a very difficult mixture for any administration. And when we were struggling for independence, many people said that Malaysia would not survive, that certainly Malaysia would not be able to develop because the indigenous people who were the majority of the citizens, upon independence, would seize the properties of the Chinese and the Indians. That was what was expected to happen by foreigners and even by some Malaysians. But thanks to the wisdom of the founding fathers, the first Prime Minister, there was no seizure, no nationalization. Instead, the leaders of the Malays, the Chinese, and Indian decided that this country belongs to all of us, and we must share this country between us, share the economic wealth, and share the political power in the country. This was a momentous decision made by the first Prime Minister, and all development that followed owes a lot to this first Prime Minister of Malaysia. The idea of what they call in Chinese, kongsi. Kongsi means sharing. We share the country, and we develop the country, and we distribute the country between all the stakeholders, all the different citizens. To implement this, we decided that we should represent, each political party should represent his own race only. The Malays would have their party, the Chinese would have the Malaysian Chinese Association, and the Indians would have the Indian Congress. But the three parties decided that they should form an alliance, a coalition of parties. This is a different alliance or coalition than those which were formed after election. You know, after election, sometimes there's no party that attains majority to form the government, and therefore they had to form a kind of post-election coalition. Such coalition won't work very well because they are always under constraint, because the smaller party always demands for a lot of places and power and all that, because they know if the small party pulls out, that coalition will fall. But our coalition is a pre-election coalition, and we have as many at the moment, as many as 14 parties in this coalition. It is so big that if any one party decides to pull out, the party still remains in power. So in that situation, nobody wants to pull out, because if he pulls out, he becomes the opposition. Now this is the idea that was mooted by the first Prime Minister, and the country owes a lot to this idea, because once we resolve the way the different races work together, we achieve that kind of stability that is needed for the country's development. Everybody knows that he has a stake, that he has a share, and that if the country grows, or what they say, the economic cake grows, then each one slice of the cake would grow so big that it would be bigger than the original 100% of the cake. So knowing that, everybody then focus more on economic development rather than too much politicking. We decided that we should share and correct the imbalances that is found in society. Now, the imbalances are due to the very poor economic achievement of the indigenous people, the Malays. They were very poor. They were in the majority. Strictly speaking, they could rule the country by themselves, but they didn't. They decided to work with the Chinese and the Indians, and although they were in the majority, they did not insist on having all the political power to themselves. They decided to work with the Chinese and give the Chinese a share of the political power through a coalition of parties. So all the time, Malaysia has been governed by all the different races in Malaysia, including, of course, the tribal people in the states of Sarawak and Sabah. With the stability due to this understanding, we focus then on economic development. And now Malaysia, as has been mentioned just now, was an agricultural country with some tin mining. Our source of income was very small, and there were about 70% of the people who were unemployed. We need to solve this problem. Of course, during the British time, they did not have any problem, any solution for the unemployment problem. But once we became independent, we became responsible, and we have to have our people employed. Now, how do we get them employed? Well, mostly it is through distribution of land. Land for the landless. We set up agencies which develop big estates owned by the settlers on this estate. Each one was given 10 acres each, 1 acre for their homes and the rest to plant rubber or palm oil and derive an income from this estate. And this scheme worked so well that this scheme called FELDA, Federal Land Development Authority, is now perhaps the biggest estate company in the world. It has about 2 million acres of cultivated land, of palm oil estate and rubber plantations, etc., under one authority. It's really very big, but the participants are the settlers who own each 10 acres of land. And that solves a part of our unemployment problem. But if you want the country to remain stable, you cannot allow 60% of the population to be unemployed. But we don't have enough land to open, otherwise we'll have to clear out all the forests that we have, and that would be a waste of resources. So we decided to industrialize. Now, this is a poor country with little capital, no know-how about manufacturing, no knowledge about the market, no understanding of management of big companies. How were we to industrialize? We decided that, well, we'll invite foreigners to come into our country to start up industries which are labor intensive. Our main objective was to create jobs for our people, not income for the government. So we allow them to be tax-free for a period of 10 years and maybe an extension of 10 years more. So lots of companies, of course, came in because the cost of labor is cheap. They don't have to pay any taxes, and they find our laborers, workers were trainable, and they could be easily adapt to a life as workers in factories. The scheme was so successful that we actually ran short of workers. And when we ran short of workers, of course, we have to open up the country to our neighbors. Our neighbors sent in their unemployed to Malaysia, and they got jobs in our industries also. But the ability to industrialize indirectly by getting foreigners to invest is very useful because we didn't have the capital, but we don't have the know-how, but our people very quickly learned how to accumulate wealth, capital, how to acquire the technology and to understand the market and the management of big industries, so that eventually it's not only the foreign investors who help to industrialize Malaysia, but also local people. Local people learned about manufacturing, and they played a role also in the industrialization process of Malaysia. So with all this, we solved the problem of unemployment. And when you solve the problem of unemployment, you also gain political stability. As you know, when you have too many poor people and too many rich people, there will be conflict. We realized, we saw what's happening in Europe, for example, because of the disparity in income between rich and poor workers, rich capitalists and poor workers. There was a lot of confrontation. It resulted in socialist and communist ideologies, and they start fighting against each other, having strikes and lockouts and the like. But in Malaysia, this did not happen because people who were unemployed before were now employed. Of course, the pay is not very high, but it was better than being unemployed. So Malaysia achieved industrial peace. Now, industrial peace is as important as political stability. Once you do that, people will want to come and invest. Locals want to invest, foreigners want to invest, and gradually the quality of the products or the manufactured goods from Malaysia improve to more sophisticated things. And then, of course, when the IT age came, we adapted to the IT age, and we had to prepare our people for this new area of industry by educating them. Now, when we have these things going, government naturally, even if the industry is tax-free, somewhere along the line, government will collect taxes from the managers, from the locals who were employed with high wages. They all pay income tax. So with the industrialization by foreigners, despite not taxing them on their income, government revenue increased. And when government revenue increased, we invested that revenue in education. Now, all of us in Malaysia believe in education. Parents are very keen on education, but some of them were very poor. So government stepped in and created lots and lots of scholarships. And we send our students mainly to Britain, because the language that they are familiar with is English. They go to Britain, they go to Canada, to United States, Australia, New Zealand, India, and many other places where education is offered in English. And we have Malaysian students all over the world. In Jordan today, we have 3,000 students, half of them studying medicine and dentistry, I think. So wherever you go in the world, I went to Moscow and I met Malaysian students. I went to the Crimea once and I met Malaysian students. They are all over the world trying to get the knowledge, because knowledge is the key to upwards mobility for them. So our people became very well educated and very well able to take up jobs which require not manual skill, but mental skills. And we produce so many of them that I'm afraid now a few of them are unemployed. But that's a good problem to have. We will solve that one day. But the fact is that industry was changing from mere assembling of products to more knowledge-based industries, IT and the like, and people were trained in IT so that they can take up the new jobs that have been created, and these new jobs naturally pays better wages. So the income of the people grew because of their skills and knowledge. And of course, when they grew, it contributed towards national wealth. It's also contributed towards the government's revenue. But apart from that, we need to have a model. We needed to have a model. We can't just think up things all by ourselves. I had traveled all over the world before I became Prime Minister, and I noticed that the Japanese were recovering very fast from the destruction of the war, the Pacific War. They were growing at a very fast rate, at 12% per annum. We thought that surely they must be doing something right. So we studied the Japanese to find out what is it that they are doing which enables them to grow and catch up very quickly with Western countries, and even almost becoming the second most powerful economy in the world. Looking at the Japanese, we learned that partly it is due to their culture and their systems. So we copied their system through a policy called the Look East policy. And it's not only to Japan, we also look at Korea, we look at Taiwan, we look at China, to learn about what they are doing and to adopt and adapt what they are doing to our Malaysian environment. And this has paid off. One thing about the Japanese that we noticed contributed towards their achievement is a very strong sense of shame. The Japanese feel ashamed of themselves if they fail. In the old days, if they fail to do something, like their boss tells them to go and do something and they fail, they would commit suicide. They would just cut up their stomach. Not a nice thing to do, but they used to do that. Of course, today, they don't cut up their stomach anymore, but they do off and on throw themselves off high buildings when they are ashamed. Now, this sense of shame is extremely important towards the development of a country. When you feel ashamed of your failure, you try not to fail. And the Japanese always try not to fail so that he won't be ashamed of himself. So he produces better quality goods, better products, increasing the quality of the products, upgrading all the time, tweaking here, tweaking there, so that what they produce is of the highest quality that they can be proud of, not ashamed of, but proud of. So we learned this from the Japanese, and I thought I could transfer this to Malaysians, but Malaysians are a little bit different from the Japanese. Not so easy to tell them to be more proud of their work. But to a certain extent, we copied the Japanese, and I think that contributed towards a sense of pride in achievement. It's not the money that you get that counts, really. What satisfies you is the result of your work. We try to tell the Malaysians, this is what you should be thinking of. Not how much you are paid, but whether what you do is something you can be proud of, the nation can be proud of. And so we find that the Look East policy contributed much towards the thinking of the Malaysians, that they must achieve what the Japanese achieved, what the Koreans achieved. And for that, of course, they must study hard, they must acquire the knowledge, they must work harder, they must be very concerned about the quality of their jobs, etc. And this, again, contributed towards the development of Malaysia. We also realized that the Japanese, in those days, not now, in those days, they have this, they have this cooperation between government and private sector, almost as if they are one body. They work well with the government works well with the private sector. The government tries to help the private sector and ensure that any problem in the way of achievement of their objectives would be removed by the government. Now, the Western people felt that this is wrong. Government should not be close to the private sector. They should be opposed to the private sector. But the Japanese thought that they should work with the private sector, and this was labeled by the West as Japan Incorporated. It was something that Japanese should be ashamed of. They should be ashamed that they are working closely, the government and the private sector are working closely under this label of Japan Incorporated. We studied that. We asked ourselves, why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't the government work with the private sector? We decided that if the private sector makes money, government makes money. We tax them. In those days, we tax them 45% income tax or corporate tax. So if they make $100, we get $45. Why should we be antagonistic towards them? We should be working with them, ensure that they make more profit and we get more in terms of 45% tax that we had on them. Now, of course, the tax has been reduced to 26%, but we are collecting even more than we were charging them 45%. And we help the private sector by sitting down with them, asking them about their problems, what the government needs to do to make it easier for them to do business. And because of this friendly attitude of the government and cooperation between government and private sector, again, people were willing to put in money and develop industries, etc., and improve their performance with the help of the government. We tell the civil servants that they must work with the private sector because their pay is coming from the private sector. If the private sector loses money, we collect no tax, we can increase your wages. But if you help the private sector make a lot of money, we collect our 26% and we can raise your wages. Once they see that, they see the light. Well, this is a good thing for us. So they work with the private sector, no more delays. You know, civil servants sometimes delay making decisions because, well, there's nothing in it for them. They delay, and then they found that when you delay making decisions, people tend to give something to to grease the passage of the application. And they thought, well, delaying is a good thing. So we had to correct that also. Yeah, because when I took over, the first thing I did was to warn people that I would be very harsh on those people who delay. And I call up people who, if there is any complaint, I'll call up the officer himself and ask him why. Why have you not approved this? And if they have no valid reason, then I told them, you better approve. So the decision making by the civil servant is much faster because there is somebody overseeing, looking over their shoulder to see what they are doing. So all these little things contribute towards a much more efficient administrative machinery. We set targets for them. We told them that we must do this within a certain period of time, and if you don't, we want to know why. This personal interest on the part of the leadership is extremely important for the efficiency of the administration. Between all these things that we do and the infrastructure we put in place, business boom. They know that if you come and invest in Malaysia. There won't be anybody putting out his hand for some money, and they will approve the application as soon as possible, or they may face some questioning by their seniors. So Malaysia grew because of that, and of course, we spend a lot of time trying to change the mindset of people, of government servants and even the business people. We used to bring them to a camp where they stay for 1 week, during which time they will be lectured to, quite often by myself, to explain to them why they must work hard, why they must improve the quality of their work, etc., why it is important that they should be honest, and if they are honest, what will be in store for them. This they have to be reminded. So for 1 week, we try to change their mindset, change their character. Now, actually, the success or otherwise of a person, a community, or a nation is due to the mindset and the value system that he believes in and he carries out. If the value system is wrong, no matter how brilliant the person is, he will fail. So he must have good value system. By good value system, of course, a lot of things make up good value system, but among them would be, number one, hard work. The willingness to work very hard. Not just to go at any time you like to the office and come back when you feel like coming back, but to adhere to the timetable, to exceed the timetable, to work harder. You must also be honest, not to cheat, not to take what is not yours, and a lot of other good values have got to be implanted in the minds of the civil servant and the private sector. And this we do by having them attend courses on civic courses where they are confined to a certain camp for about a week, and they are made to do all kinds of things to discipline them, to tell them the importance of teamwork, etc. And this also contributed towards making them less of the laid-back people that they used to be. Before they, well, what's the good of working anyway? Today is today, what you produce today, you consume today, the next day is another day. But now we have to think about the future. You have to think about your children, their education, that you must have the money for their education, etc., etc. They think far into the future, and we, of course, have 5-year plans, 10-year plans, and even 30-year plans. The 30-year plans is called the Vision Plan. This was launched in 1991. It is for 30 years. It's called Vision 2020. Why 2020? That's because as a doctor, I know that perfect vision is 2020 or 66. So since 30 years from that time, it will be 2020. We fix on 2020 for a perfect vision of the future for Malaysia. We want to be a fully developed country by our own interpretation. So Vision 2020 helps us to be focused. We know where we are going. We want to achieve this goal, and to achieve that goal, there are certain things that you must do now and during the 5-year plans, so that in 30 years' time, we would become a fully developed country. It is very ambitious, but I think it is achievable if you do the right things. Of course, if you do the wrong things, you will never achieve anything. But Malaysia had that capacity. Malaysia, for example, has got a lot of money because the people save money. 40% of the GDP is saved every year. It is saved through various institutions. One of the biggest institutions is the Provident Fund, which is a contribution by the worker and the employer to the amount of 20% of the wage, the worker paying 9% of his wage, the employer pays 11%, so we get 20%. And that money is huge today. It adds up to about 400 billion Malaysian ringgit, which is equivalent to 100 billion US dollar. Now, of course, the ringgit has come down a bit. But actually, our savings were huge. Then we have other savings, like people go on pilgrimage every year, and they need to save money. Keeping the money at home doesn't make anything. The money depreciates in value. But if they put it in a central fund called Tabung Haji, the Pilgrims Fund Board, they put the money there. The board will invest the money, give them some return, or increase their savings. And when they want to perform the Hajj, the board will make all the arrangements for the performance of the Hajj. At the same time, this board has accumulated billions of ringgit which are available for investment. We have other funds as well, which actually force saving. But it is meant for the good of the people. So Malaysian saving makes up about 40%, it amounts to about 40% of the GDP. So we have huge sums of money. However, during the financial crisis, as you know, our currency was devalued. Suddenly we became very poor. We couldn't buy the things we used to import because everything that is imported costs a lot more money. So we decided that we should not follow the IMF. We studied their proposal. What they were advising us to do would impoverish us more. That is a fact. That is a fact. So for almost 2 years we suffered. We were poor, but we never gave in until we found a way to tackle the problem. What was happening, of course, was they were selling our currency. They were selling huge amounts of our currency. And naturally, if you keep on selling things, the value goes down. You keep on selling the ringgit, the value of exchange value of the ringgit goes down to almost half what it was. If they buy, then the value goes up. What they did was to sell and sell and sell until the value is right down there. Then they buy and deliver to the earlier buyers at the higher price, and they make tons of money. That's what currency traders are doing. So the answer to that was to stop them from trading. Now, how do we stop them? They are very powerful. You say anything against them, next day the currency drops in value. They are so powerful. So we decided that we'll tell our central bank to tell all the banks in Malaysia that any transfer of funds from A to B will not be valid. If A buys from B, A will not get the money because such transaction is illegal. So once you do that, they couldn't trade and they stopped depreciating our currency. And we could fix our exchange rate to the value that we like, and the country soon recover. So by not swallowing all these ideas coming out of the rich countries, we were able to protect ourselves. Globalization and all that, we think that there's no way we can avoid globalization because communications means are very smooth and very fast now, and people can move anywhere they like because travel facilities are very, very good and very efficient. So there must be a closer relation between countries and countries. We will become a global village. So globalization would happen anyhow. But should it happen only in the financial field? Because when we were talking about globalization, they were talking about capital moving between countries without hindrance. To them, that is globalization. And when they come into our country with their capital, they can buy up shares in the market, push up the value of the shares by buying repeatedly, and then dump the shares, take out their money, and the local investors will suffer. That's what they wanted to do. So we said it's not going to be allowed just to go to do like that. If you want to have smooth transfer of funds between countries, you should also allow a smooth transfer of other things across boundaries which are no longer there. When we suggested to them that maybe if we send to Europe and America 100 million Chinese, poor Chinese, 100 million poor Indians to their countries, that is also part of globalization in a borderless world. When I asked them, how about that? Oh, no. Only capital will move to and fro, not people. And you know what's happening in Europe today. I think all the Africans should evacuate their unstable countries and go and live in Europe, very stable country. And the Indians and the Chinese also should go there. Because they brought to Malaysia the Indians and the Chinese. We were all Malays before. But they brought in now we have a problem of race relations. But now it is their turn. They should accept all these foreigners because we are going to have globalization. Of course, it's a way to counter some of their ideas. But our belief is that any idea coming from anybody is for his own good, not for your good, not for other people's good. So when they propose something like globalization, and they interpret it to mean free movement of capital, it is meant to be for their own good. So we have to reinterpret globalization. And for us, globalization means freedom for poor people from the south to move to the rich countries of the north. That would be globalization with a borderless world. So I don't think they like that very much. But anyway, it stops them from talking too much about their money coming into our country. Because when they devalued our currency, they made us very poor. In terms of our currency, maybe a company may be worth 100 million ringgit. But because the ringgit has depreciated, in terms of foreign country, is now almost half the price. So they can come in with their capital and buy up these companies which are suffering because of the depreciation of the currency, they are not doing well. They can buy these companies at fire sale price. And then once they have bought the banks and the industries at this cheap price, because these people were nearly bankrupt, then they can stop devaluing the currency, the economy will recover, the industries and the banks will recover, and then they can make a pile out of selling back to the people, the company which now has appreciated in value. Maybe we are a little bit suspicious about people, but I think that is their intention. Of course, they are against conspiracy theories, but I think there is some conspiracy somewhere. We haven't found it yet, but I think there is somewhere. course, in foreign affairs, we are friendly with all the countries of the world. We don't want to be seen to be friendly with the East or the West. We are friendly with everyone. So when we wanted to buy aircrafts and all that, we thought that we could buy some Russian aircraft also. Why buy everything from the West, from America? But of course, our Air Force officers love American planes, and they bought the F-18. But the Americans didn't give them the source code. So if you want to fly and bomb our neighbor, we will have to ask the Americans whether we could do so or not. So those planes are no good except for air shows. But the Russians impose no condition. You want to fly and bomb anybody, go ahead. You see, we'll give you all the bombs that you want. So that is the story of Malaysia. And I know there might be other things that I have not covered. I'll be very happy to answer questions. Thank you.